Hello and welcome to PMQs with Graham Hughes on Labour Social. Let's get into it, shall we? Time and tide wait for no man, and neither does Lindsay Hoyle with announcing that it's time to get going.
We now come to the start of questions to Prime Minister. Fleur Anderson.
Number one, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the thoughts of the House and the country are with the King and his family. We wish His Majesty a speedy recovery and look forward to him resuming his public-facing duties in due course. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also send my best wishes to the King. Last week, the Foreign Secretary said that we, with allies, will look at the issue of recognising a Palestinian state so that the Palestinian people can see irreversible progress towards a two-state solution. But afterwards, it was briefed that these words had not been signed off by number 10. Does the Prime Minister agree with his Foreign Secretary?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our long-standing position has been that we will recognise a Palestinian state at a time that is most conducive to the peace process. But the most important thing is we are committed to that two-state solution and working with our allies to bring it about.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People in Northampton South are desperately short of NHS dental provision. Indeed, in Duston there is now none at all. So today's dentistry recovery plan announcements are hugely welcome. But can the Prime Minister guarantee my residents improvements within months and not years?
Mr. Speaker, we are publishing the dentistry recovery plan today, and my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be making a statement
14
shortly.
years too late,
Over
but whatever.
1 million more people saw an NHS dentist last year than the year before, but we know that there is more to do, and that's why the recovery plan will make sure that NHS dental care is faster, simpler and fairer for patients and staff.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir.
Just before we get to Keir Starmer, he loves comparing the track record of the government to the track record of the same government a year earlier. He does this all the time. It's kind of painful.
Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister in sending His Majesty the King our very best wishes for his treatment. Across this House, we all look forward to seeing him back to full health as quickly as possible. Mr. Speaker, this week the unwavering bravery of Brianna Jay's mother, Esther, has touched us all. As a father, I can't even imagine the pain that she's going through, and I'm glad that she's with us in the gallery here today. Mr. Speaker, a year ago, the Prime Minister promised to bring NHS waiting lists down. Isn't he glad he didn't bet £1,000 on it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at least I stand by my commitments.
Oh, there you go, straight away.
He's so indecisive, the only bet he'd make is an each-way bet.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he says he stands by his commitments. He once insisted that if he missed his promises, these are the words he used, I'm the Prime Minister, and then he said, it's on me personally.
Yeah.
Today we learned from his own officials that he's the blocker to any deal to end the doctor strikes. Yep. And he's always, every time he's asked, he blames everyone else. So what exactly did he mean when he said it's on him personally if he doesn't meet his promise?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are bringing the waiting list down for the longest waiters. We're making progress. But it's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
In the gallery. Thanks for that. Yeah. Nice stuff.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame. Parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute. Of all.
Either side.
Absolute shame.
I think the member's getting carried away. Can I just say that our constituents want to hear the questions and they certainly want to hear the answers. They don't want to hear organised barracking. So please, I want no more. Keir Starmer.
I think the role of the Prime Minister is to ensure that every single citizen in this country feels safe and respected. It's a shame the Prime Minister doesn't share that. I welcome the fact that he's finally admitted that he's failed on waiting lists in the NHS. I also welcome that he's finally acknowledged the crisis in NHS dentistry. He's calling it a recovery plan after 14 years of Tory government. What exactly does he think the NHS dentistry is recovering from?
It's recovering from the Tories. Exactly my point.
As ever, Mr. Speaker, he seems to convene.
Certainly not having enough of the front bench either. Please, I want to hear it. The election fever, I'm hoping, is not coming tomorrow, so let's not behave as though it is. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as ever, he conveniently forgets the impact of a pandemic on NHS dentistry, and it was specifically because of the close proximity nature of dental provision that it was unable to operate as normal throughout the pandemic. That was a recommendation of the medical and clinical experts, Mr. Speaker, which is why, inevitably, there is a backlog in dental care and the impact that has. But that's why, as my honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will outline later today for the House, we're putting more funding in to provide more NHS provision across the country, on top of plans that will see the number of dental training places increase by 40%, Mr. Speaker. But I would actually just point out, our plans mean that there will be 2.5 million more NHS appointments, which is in fact 3 times more than the Labour Party are proposing.
That's some bullshit statistics right there.
Mr. Speaker, there are some areas in the country where you literally can't have an NHS dentist, and he says that's down to COVID. People are literally pulling out their own teeth.
Sorry. Can I just say, I don't need any more off this front bench either. Do we understand each other? Carry on, Kirsten.
Speaker, people are literally pulling their teeth out using pliers. It's an experience that can be compared with extracting an answer from the Prime Minister at this dispatch box. The truth is, after 14 years of neglect, this recovery plan is just a desperate attempt to try to recover back to square one. If he wanted to move forward, he should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's look at that record. We've, in the NHS, record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and we'll never let them do that here.
And he said back to square one.
Mr. Speaker, when he admitted that he'd failed on waiting lists, I actually thought that we might be entering a new era of integrity, professionalism and accountability. Remember that one? But just like all the other relaunches, it's proved to be a false dawn, still blaming everyone else, still removed from reality. It's very simple. You can either back more NHS appointments or more tax avoidance. We know what side we're on. Why doesn't he?
Mr. Speaker, the best way to ensure that we continue to fund the NHS, as we have, is not to make £28 billion of unfunded spending commitments.
Oh, there we go, he said it again.
And just this morning, independent Treasury officials have published a formal costing of just one part of their eco-promise, their insulation scheme, and it turns out that it will cost double what they had previously claimed. Not the £6 billion that Labour accounted for, but £13 billion every single year. It's now crystal clear they have absolutely no plan, but we all know how they're going to fund that gap. More taxes on hard-working people.
Obviously. With the highest
Mr. Speaker, this is Mr. 25 tax rises. He's literally the country's expert on putting taxes up, and he thinks he can lecture everyone else on the economy. Last week, he and his MPs were laughing at someone whose mortgage had gone up £1,000 a month. This week, he's casually made a £1,000 bet in the middle of an interview. Last week, he thought even raising questions about the cost of living was, and I quote, resorting to the politics of envy. And this week he's finally found the cause that he wants to rally around, the non-dom status. When he finds himself backing tax avoidance over NHS appointments, does he start to understand why his own MPs are saying he simply does not get what Britain needs?
Prime Minister.
Out of touch.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take any lectures about getting getting Britain from a man who thought it was right to defend terrorists, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
What we're doing is building a brighter future.
Right, I'm just going to stop it there, right? When Starmer was working as a defence lawyer, they have what's called the cab rank rule, which is that basically you're in a list, and when someone needs a public defender, you are next on the list. You don't choose your clients. And he's making out like Keir Starmer was paid by a terrorist group to defend them, which they weren't. That is a lie. That is a massive libelous lie. And if he repeated it out of the House of Commons, Starmer could sue. And he has repeated it outside the House of Commons when he was talking to Piers Morgan earlier this week and at the weekend, sorry. And he should sue. Like, Starmer should sue. Phil Morehouse did a great video about this on a different a different bias. Please check it out.
For our country, in just the last week, expanding healthcare in pharmacies. Today, expanding dental care. This week, helping millions with the cost of living, and most importantly, cutting national insurance. All while the Labour Party argue over 28 billion different ways to raise people's taxes. That's the difference
he said it
between
again.
us. We're delivering a plan. They can't even agree on one.
Oh, he said delivering. He said it. He said
I
they're
send our best
delivering.
wishes to the King and royal family. Mr. Speaker, despite the popular narrative, our economy is doing well, with an unemployment rate...
What? Doesn't grow.
With
Doesn't
an
grow since
unemployment
2007.
rate well below the EU average, strong inward investment
got any
and
money.
record employment.
People are working for no money.
Taxes are higher than Conservatives would like, but does my right honourable friend agree that a key reason for this is that we rightly spent $400 billion on COVID support, including one of the most generous furlough schemes, in order to ensure that no one got left behind, and that it is our intention and instinct to lower taxes, unlike the party's opposite.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right to highlight our record of providing support to the country when it needed it, whether it's the NHS, vaccines or furlough during COVID, or most recently help with people's energy bills. We're only able to afford that because of the strong management of our economy, which is why we must stick with the plan, not risk going back to square one with the Labour Party, who, as we know, have absolutely no plan and will cost everyone in this country with their £28 billion worth of tax rises.
He said it again. 28 billion. He's obsessed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I begin by expressing my heartfelt sympathies to Brianna's mother, who is in the public gallery as we speak, and also to send my best wishes to King Charles in what will hopefully be a quick and full recovery. Mr. Speaker, the public are used to the Tories gambling on the lives of others. Boris Johnson, he did it with public health during the pandemic. His immediate successor, she did it with household finances. So not to be outdone, the Prime Minister on Monday this week accepted a crude bet regarding the lives of asylum seekers. In doing so, he demeaned them as individuals and he degraded the office that he currently holds. So can I ask him, will he apologise?
Mr. Speaker, we may have a principal disagreement on this. I believe, and we believe, that if someone comes to this country illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay, they should be removed, and that's why we're committed to our Rwanda scheme.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, as ever, the Prime Minister does himself no favours, because, of course, the bet to which we are referring was worth £1,000, and it came just hours before the Prime Minister ended cost of living support worth just £900. And his justification for doing so was that the cost of living crisis is easing. So can I ask him, what does he believe leaves him looking most out of touch with the public? Gambling £1,000 or believing that the cost of living crisis is getting better?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks about the cost of living. Perhaps he can explain to the Scottish people why it is that whilst the UK Conservative government is cutting their taxes, the Scottish government is raising them.
He's not cutting taxes. He's not cutting taxes.
Mr. Speaker, the thought...
They're not cutting taxes. Taxes are the highest they have ever been in the history of the United Kingdom. The tax burden is the highest it has ever been. under the Tories, under 14 years of Tory mismanagement.
So the people of East Worthing and Shoreham are with His Majesty as well. The Archbishop of Canterbury has admitted that since taking office, the attendance at the Church of England has dropped by 15%. And in the 10 years to COVID, the number of baptisms in the Church of England has fallen from 140,000 a year to 87,000. So Christianity in the UK seems to be on the wane, unless apparently you are from a Muslim country in the middle of an asylum claim, and we are now told that 1 in 7 occupants of the BB Stockholm have suddenly become practising Christians. Can I ask the Prime Minister, given that the Church of England has now issued secret guidance for clergy supporting asylum applications for these Damascene conversions, who is the Church accountable to, and are taxpayers being scammed by the Archbishop?
Mr. Speaker, when it comes
War
to illegal
on the
migrants,
Church
we
of
need to have a
England?
system whereby if someone comes here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. I can tell him that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has asked for more information about the extent to which migrants converting to Christianity is playing a role in our asylum system, and more generally, under our Illegal Migration Act, anyone entering the UK illegally will not be granted asylum here. That's why we need to have somewhere to send them, and why our Rwanda scheme is so important. The Labour Party have blocked these measures every single step of the way because they don't have a plan and they won't keep Britain safe.
How have they blocked it? How have
Speaker,
they blocked
could I,
it?
on
They're
behalf
not
of
in
my party,
power.
extend our best wishes to His Majesty the King for a full recovery. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for his dedication and leadership in helping us to restore our place in the United Kingdom and its internal market, and to revive our political institutions at Stormont. The Union is more secure as a result of our combined endeavours, and together we have greatly enhanced the potential to build a strong and prosperous economy that will help to cement our peace in Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, securing peace in an unstable world is vital for all of us. And therefore will the Prime Minister examine the findings of a recent report by Policy Exchange that calls for Northern Ireland to play an even greater role in the defence of our nation?
Prime Minister.
Can I start by thanking and paying tribute to my honourable friend for his own leadership over the past few months. He and I agree that the Union is stronger for the return of devolution and the work that we've done. I'd be delighted to examine the findings of the report, and I've seen with my own visits the vital role that Northern Ireland is playing through the location of firms like Tallers and Harland and Wolff. But as he will know, I'm delighted in last week's command paper we specifically committed to examining how we can further bolster Northern Ireland's share of the UK defence sector, because it's another essential pillar of our precious economic union.
Virginia Crosby.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister know where the best site for large-scale new nuclear in the UK is? And will he commit to buying the Wilver site, now the only gigawatt site in Wales this year, and make sure it's progressed as soon as possible to meet our net zero and energy security needs and give the enormous boost to the Ynys Môn and North Wales economy?
Prime Minister.
As ever, my honourable friend is fantastic champion for Wilfer and the nuclear industry. I can confirm to her that Wilfer is a candidate for the new nuclear site and one of a number of potential sites that could host civil nuclear projects. No decisions have been taken at present, but Great British Nuclear is working with the government to support access. And we're also developing a new national policy statement providing the planning framework for new nuclear power, and would very much welcome her and other contributions to that consultation.
Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, last year the Prime Minister and other senior ministers were given the conclusions of a government audit of research programmes at UK universities with links to the Chinese state. The audit flagged up hundreds of programmes of being at high risk of being used potentially by the CCP for military use and other applications in strategic and sensitive areas that are of high interest to an authoritarian regime such as China. A smaller proportion were judged to be extremely high risk. Despite that, the government has elected to do nothing about it. So will the Prime Minister confirm his personal knowledge of that report and explain to the House why no action is to be taken? These programmes have to be continued unimpeded.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to take a robust and proactive approach towards our relationship with China, rooted in the UK's national interest and values. And in fact, our National Security Act, which we passed last year, brings together vital new measures to protect our national security, and that includes creating a foreign influence registration scheme through the Act, which has been created to tackle specifically covert influence in the UK, and will continue to take all possible powers to keep the country safe.
Parliament.
Two remarkably talented and enthusiastic individuals from Kettering, Becky Horrell and Lindsay Atkins, have put together a really ambitious £2 million bid to repurpose the redundant Gala Bingo Hall site in Kettering High Street into a community arts, music, business and family hub, which would be simply transformative for Kettering Town Centre. Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, please be kind enough to facilitate a meeting for us with the relevant culture and levelling up ministers so we can explore how a combined community ownership fund and cultural development fund bid might get us across the line.
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this exciting initiative and also commend Becky and Lindsay for their campaigning. He'll know that our £150 million community ownership fund is there specifically to help safeguard small but much loved local assets, and indeed our cultural development fund, like the one he mentions, is there to support further cultural projects as well. I will ensure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss these plans further and wish him and his constituents all the best with this redevelopment project.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Data revealed by the Centre for Cities showed that after 14 years of Tory rule, towns and cities in every corner of our country have been levelled down, left behind and left out of pocket. On average, people are over £10,000 a year worse off because his party has failed on growth. When will the Prime Minister take responsibility for breaking Britain?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, what we're seeing is record investment in our towns across the UK, many of which were neglected by the Labour Party for decades, Mr. Speaker. But if we really care about levelling up, what we need to do is avoid saddling hard-working Britons with higher taxes, which is exactly what Labour's £28 billion green spending spree would do.
Done it again! £28 billion!
For 27 years, constituents across the Vale of Glamorgan and across the whole of Wales sadly have to wait longer to see a doctor, longer for an ambulance, longer at A&E and longer for an operation than patients in England. There are 24,785 patients in Wales waiting longer than 2 years for an operation. That number in England is 227. Does my right honourable friend agree that Aneurin Bevan will be turning in his grave on the fact that you can't trust Labour with the NHS?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Whereas here in England we have a plan when it comes to education, where we're marching up the league tables and we have virtually eliminated those waiting the longest amount of time. But in Labour-run Wales, as he said, education rates are falling and waiting lists over 18 months are more than 10 times higher than here in England. It's crystal clear we should stick to our plan for a brighter future and not go back to square one with Labour.
Oh, and he's gone back to square one as well.
Mr. Speaker, according to Open Democracy this week, since 1999, at least 391 people have died at our borders. That is a rate, Prime Minister, of more than one man, one woman per month for 25 years. And on top of this, the financial cost of this deadly and failed border regime, as well as the Prime Minister's plan for Rwanda, is estimated to cost at least £800 million since 2014. So will the Prime Minister now show that he understands that the people whose lives he's making sick bets on are human beings and provide them with safe routes to the UK in order to seek asylum instead of more failed and extreme forms of deterrence?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's in fact criminal gangs that are exploiting vulnerable people and leading many of them to lose their lives as they make these dangerous crossings. Now, on this side of the House, we think that's wrong and we want to do something about it, which is why we need to get a deterrent up and running and be able to send people to Rwanda. It's his party that opposes that, so the question for them is why do they remain on the side of the criminal people smugglers?
Let's
Mr.
ask Keir questions
February
instead.
marks Emotional Health, Boost Your Self-Esteem and Children's Mental Health Month. In recent years, something like 6,500 people die in the UK each year due to suicide. And in 2021, I was nearly one of them. Luckily, my attempt failed. I was found by family members quickly. I received amazing care at St Helier and Springfield hospitals, didn't do any permanent damage, and was well looked after by the NHS in the months that followed. And I want to take this chance to say thank you to everyone who saved me, and sorry to my family and loved ones who I put through such an awful ordeal. In that moment, I felt alone and scared and like there was no way out. and that the world would be better off without me in it. But I don't recognise that man anymore. I know that nothing is ever really worth that. Help really is out there, and I'm pretty awesome. Does the Prime Minister agree that one death by suicide is one too many?
Yes,
and will he send a message from the dispatch box today that whatever you're going through, you are not alone, that help is out there, and better days lie ahead?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will join me in commending my honourable friend for his bravery in sharing his story, and I can absolutely assure him that we take this issue incredibly seriously. The new suicide prevention strategy ensures that we will have the actions in place to reduce suicide over the next years, because we absolutely recognise the impact that it has on people, their families, and we should do everything we can to prevent that from happening.
You're doing nothing. You're doing next to nothing. You're doing the bare minimum, like
and
you
may I
always
take the
do.
opportunity to ask the Prime Minister if he will consider apologising to Brianna Gray's mother for his insensitive comment. But turning to my question, the independent report into Teesworks, released last Monday, throws up more questions than it answers. And it's vital that we now have a National Audit Office investigation. The report was scathing and said there is insufficient transparency to offer evidence of value for money. Shouldn't the government lead by example, and will the Prime Minister finally release details of his conversations surrounding Teesworks, as he was asked to do twice last year?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady was talking about the report in Teesworks, as far as I could see, and what that report noted was that the pace and scope of the regeneration had had a wide-reaching positive impact on the local economy, and of course it was an independent external report. It makes it clear that there's no evidence of corruption or illegality, and the government will of course respond to the recommendations in the report as soon as possible.
Alicia Cairns.
Speaker, can I give my heartfelt thanks to the Prime Minister for his support for our Melton Harbour and Stamford villages following the recent devastating flooding. But tens of homes...
I just want to stop it there. I can't believe that the Prime Minister of our country made a transphobic joke, a transphobic dig at Keir Starmer with the mother of a murdered trans teenager in the gallery. And when asked to apologise, he just ignored it. Oh God, I just don't want to live in this country anymore.
Farms and businesses in Rutland were also devastated, but our county is in effect excluded from ever receiving support in the future due to the arbitrary law that is currently put in place.
Off into the sea.
Flood support should be based on the most affected or a percentage of population, but Rutland has to have 1,000th more flooding than next door Lincolnshire for us to ever access support. So will my right honourable friend please give a meeting to me and the member for Swindon South to discuss this important issue?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, I extend my sympathy to all those impacted by the recent storms and flooding. We are investing record sums in flood defence across England, and the recovery support framework is in place for families and businesses in every area that have experienced exceptional flooding. I know that my honourable friend is in touch with DLUC ministers about how those schemes affect her constituency, but I'll ensure that she gets the correspondence and meetings that she needs to deliver for her local communities.
Daisy Cooper.
Deal with that later.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I challenged the Prime Minister on his government's broken promise on building new hospitals by 2030, including in my own area. But now it seems that the government are downgrading existing hospitals too. Children and parents in Eastbourne will be forced to travel for miles if the proposed downgrade of the hospital's paediatric services goes ahead. Campaigners have asked the government to call in this disastrous plan. Will the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, actually, we're investing record sums in improving hospital infrastructure across the country. In Eastbourne, in particular, spades are already in the ground to deliver an elective surgical hub, Mr. Speaker. And I know that there is local Liberal Democrats scaremongering about the future of services. But the local Conservative MP is doing a fantastic job engaging with her community and working with local health officials.
Jenston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday it was my huge pleasure to host the Aerospace Defence and Security Industry Apprenticeships event in Parliament, welcoming 2 apprentices from Collins Aerospace in Wolverhampton. Would he join me in National Apprenticeships Week for celebrating the opportunities apprenticeships can provide in the defence industry and also in our armed forces, who are all in our top 10 apprenticeship providers.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight the importance of our apprenticeship provision, which is providing young people with opportunities across the country, but particularly, as she says, in the defence and aerospace sector. And those plans are in stark contrast to those of the party opposite, who have caved into big business and are now proposing to halve the amount of apprenticeship funding and halve the number of apprenticeships.
Kenny McCaskill.
If Grangemouth refinery closes, Scotland will be the only major oil-producing nation without a refinery capacity. At a time of energy insecurity, is it not economic madness to allow a profitable plant to close? And is it not environmental madness to transship oil for refining and distribution across the growingly dangerous high seas? Given the billions that he has received from North Sea oil and the billions that he will continue to receive from North Sea oil, will he ensure that Scotland retains a refinery capacity for Scotland's oil?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the future of Grangemouth refinery is obviously a commercial decision for their owners, but I'm told that the site will remain operating as a refinery until at least May of 2025. And in the meantime, the UK and Scottish governments are working together to seek assurances from Grangemouth about how they are supporting employees. But we remain confident in our fuel supply. And in terms of energy security, which you mentioned, that's why this government is unambiguously backing the North Sea oil and gas sector, because that's how you support energy security in this country, attract investment and create jobs, particularly in Scotland.
Dame Caroline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very proud that it was a Conservative government that appointed the Patient Safety Commissioner, and proud that we commissioned the Hughes report into medical devices and medicines, which was published this morning. Will my right honourable friend also make me proud that we can address the points she has raised and bring forward a redress scheme in a timely manner?
Prime Minister.
I'm grateful to the Patient Safety Commissioner and her team for their work on this important issue, one which I know my honourable friend has spoken about in the past. Of course, our sympathies, first and foremost, remain with those affected by sodium valproate. We're focused on improving the system and how the system listens to patients, and it's right that the government carefully considers the report's recommendations. The Department for Health will be responding to the report in due course, and the Health Secretary will keep the House updated on a regular basis.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my Tamworth constituents, like local mom Jessica, have contacted me about special educational needs and disability support. Jessica's son has waited years for an autism diagnosis and doesn't expect to have an education, health and care plan in place by the time that he goes to secondary school. Will the Prime Minister confirm that students that need an EHCP will get them so that they can thrive in school?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course we want to see every child thrive at school, which is why we've tripled the amount going into special educational needs for capital places and put more money in to support EHCP plans. I'm sorry to hear about the case you mentions. I'll make sure that we continue to look at that in particular, because, as she said, we want every child to thrive at school.
Charlotte Shelbrooke.
Wishes to His Majesty the King and Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. I know my right honourable friend, and building on the answer to my right honourable friend, is exceptionally pleased with the Hughes report that's come out today. And there's been a huge amount of work that's taken across this chamber, from the Honourable Lady for Livingston, the Honourable Lady for Washington, and my right honourable friend for Southampton and Romsey. May I push the point, though, to my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, that tens of thousands of women and children have suffered immensely since the 1970s, and government after government has not done anything about this. I'm proud that this government has done something about it. So can I urge my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, in the strongest possible terms, to talk to our right honourable friend, the Chancellors, to make sure that at the budget we can really address the issues raised in the Hughes report.
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend and colleagues on all sides of the House for their campaigning over many years on this issue. As I said, it's right that we not only do we extend our sympathies to those affected, that we carefully consider the recommendations from the Commissioner's report, and I can assure him we will do that with all due haste, and I know that the Health Secretary will keep the House updated.
Do you know, I've actually got a Moment of Truth script, which is nearly written, about the times that they've mentioned used transphobia during PMQs. I'll try and get it on today, Joe, since you asked so nicely and also gave the super chat. I have to warn you, though, I am feeling very under the weather, so it might not be delivered with the normal gusto. But yeah, back to this crap.
Final question, Vicky Foxcroft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why did the Prime Minister downgrade the role of Minister for Disabled People? What message does he think this sends to them? And will he commit to reconsider this move, ensure the role is a Minister of State? And if not, will he agree to meet with me and disabled people's organisations and explain his reasoning?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, actually, the Minister for Disabled People is going to do a fantastic job because she passionately cares about this issue. And this government has a record to be proud of, whether it's supporting many more of those with disabilities into work, ensuring they can live independently, or making sure that children with complex disabilities have access to more changing places across the country, because those, Mr. Speaker, are the values of this Conservative government. And Mrs. I could just say also to Brianna Gray's mum, who is here, as I've said earlier this week, what happened was an unspeakable and shocking tragedy, Mr. Speaker. And as I said earlier this week, in the face of that, for her mother to demonstrate the compassion and empathy that she did last weekend, I thought demonstrated the very best of humanity.
So you're going to apologise for casual transphobia then?
And she deserves all our admiration and praise for that.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah, she deserves all our respect. Yeah, apart from the respect of saying that she was a woman. I'm sorry. I'm usually left a little bit angry at the end of Prime Minister's questions, but that was off the charts. How dare he? How dare he mock a murder victim with the murder victim's mum in the gallery? How dare he? These bastards have to get yeeted out of office immediately. Captain Bart Roberts, thank you very much. Thanks to all, but especially Phil and Graham for keeping me sane in an insane world. Well, look, thanks to everyone who jumps in the chat. I mean, I know we get a few trolls, but not many. But honestly, going through, I don't know if you've been on this channel before it became Labour Social, but all through lockdown and things, I needed this. I needed to know that there were other people out there who weren't insane like this government and all the people running the media. So thank you, Captain Bart Roberts, for the super chat, and just thank you for watching and you know, affirming to me that there are people out there who are good and actually care about things like decency. I'm just that's beyond the pale. If that was an MP, imagine if that was like a Labour MP in the Labour administration. He stood up and made a joke like that. You know, had a dig in those I mean, it's bad enough anyway, but in that situation, they would have to resign. They would be forced to resign. They'd be like, there'd be no question about it. They would lose the whip. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's all just a joke. You can see it. He's a multi-millionaire. He's the richest man who's ever been Prime Minister. He's worth over £700 million. He doesn't have to do this job. The job only pays about £130,000 a year. He doesn't have to do this job. He's only doing it to feather his own nest. He just thinks it's a joke. It's just, sixth form debating societies to him. It's not real people with real lives going through real things. He can give a shit. And you see how obviously that comes across in the crassness, the absolute crassness of what he's just said. Thanks very much to Serendipity Journey. Get some cold and flu remedies and get well soon. Thank you very much for the super chat. Audrey says, my whole body hurts here watching that. I'm not surprised, Audrey. We are your support network as much as you are our solidarity, mate. Thanks, Nick and Diff. Really appreciate it. Right, I'm going to go back to bed. But I will work on a moment of truth. I've got 2 in the pipeline that I've scripted up. But I think in response to Rishi Sunak's comments today, I need to finish the one about transphobia in the Commons there, especially in PMQs, and its parallels with the homophobia of the 1980s. It's the same, It's so similar. It's painful to see people making the same shit jokes again after all this, and when you've got like a comedian like Ricky Gervais, who used to be funny, going on stage and making the same jokes as Rishi Sunak against a marginalised part of our community, a demonised part of our community for just existing. I mean, there's something very, very wrong in our society right now. Very wrong indeed. Thank you very much to Kit Knight for the super chat there. Love to you, comrade. Your solidarity is priceless. Oh, thank you, Kit. And I really appreciate the super chat there. And yeah, I mean, I can't. I feel with the elevated levels of transphobia that we've seen over the last few years, and it really has just started over the last few years. I know there's always been that underlying transphobia, but it's never been so in your face as it has over this last few years. And to any of people in the trans community, I just know that there are people out there who want to support you and love you and treat you like you deserve to be treated like human beings. And the fact that we've gone so far in this direction after we thought things had been won, we thought that gay marriage was allowed, the stigma of being gay had become less and less of an issue, and now they've just replaced it with transphobia. And yeah, I don't like the way that the country is going with this. I don't like the way that the US is going. I don't like the way social media is going, where this kind of transphobia, this bigotry, it's bigotry, that's what it is seen as permissible. Thanks very much to Ryan for the super chat as well with the trans flags there. Alex says, I'm gay. I'm proud of my trans members of my community, which is really lovely from Alex as well. But just know that there are people out there who do have your back in this, and we'll win. We'll win because the forces of goodness always win eventually. But we can't let ourselves become despondent and think, there's no point because they're too powerful, they're too pervasive, I should say. We thought that way about apartheid. We thought that way about segregation in the South in America. We thought that way about being gay in the United Kingdom. If you look at what happened to Alan Turing, or even Oscar Wilde, for God's sake, he went to jail. But eventually, being nice will win out. Eventually, I just hate that we have to live through this stupid period in our lives. So yeah, I'll get onto that. If I haven't got that online today, I'll definitely have it online tomorrow. The Moment of Truth. And tomorrow, Phil Morehouse will be here for Morning Brew at 9:30. So if you would like to tune into that, I'll be in the chat. Hopefully with me Lemsip chatting away. So thank you so much for joining us for this. I'm sorry that was so painful. I'm really, really sorry. I hope the fact that we could talk about it and we have a little bit of chat and we can all rage together might have taken the edge off a little bit, but that was particularly disgusting. And it just goes to show that no matter how low you think the Tories can go, they can always go lower. Until next time, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.